Of Luka Drakulic. Our father, Luka Drakulic, was born in the year 1884 in the selo or village of Okic, Tušilović, in what was once part of the Austro-Hungary Empire, but today is Croatia. He was the third of four sons born to Petra Brdar and Svio Drakulic. The siblings included a sister Ljuba, who was the eldest, but little is known about her. Ljuba was probably born in the year 1878, according to the pattern of years Petra's children were born. After Ljuba came Dragic, who was said to be born around 1880. Ljuban, August 15, 1882. Luka said he was born in the year 1884, and Juro was born May 1st, 1886. Ljuban and Juro George are the only ones whose birth month, day, and year is known. Because of the war waged in Croatia during World War II, the baptismal records of Serbians were destroyed by the Ustasha when Serbian churches were burned. Svio and Petra lived a typical poor peasant life, as many living at that time. Poverty surrounded the area. Svio died when Luka was only 3 or 4 years old. Aside from this knowledge, he had no memories of his father, nor a picture to view. His memory of life with his mother and siblings, he recalled, was only agonized poverty, which many times, years later, he would tell his own children, "I would not wish that part of my life on a dog, let alone a human." Hunger was an everyday fact back then. Even in his old age, his eyes would fill with tears as he thought of his mother and how she tried to hold the family together. Apparently, Dragic and Ljuban, as young as they were, left the family and went to work. Luka told how heartbreaking it was for his mother in those years of poverty. He recalled how Petra sought work among the villagers so she could buy some cornmeal or whatever to feed Luka and his then baby brother, Juro, who was probably perhaps only a little over a year, perhaps even 2, when Svio died. While Petra went about the village seeking some work, as the children grew a little older, she would leave Luka to watch Juro. And one day, it was really a bad day for all of them. Juro kept crying and crying. Luka said he was as hungry as Juro, but he knew no crying could help either of them. But he said what was most sad was when his mother came home and she was crying too because she couldn't find any work. She left the house and went outside and came back with what he referred to as some kind of trava, grass, and put it in some water to cook. Juro was still suckling his mother's breast, even though he was way past the age where he should have been weaned. And Luka said he tried to take his mind off of the hunger by getting him to play some games of sort. But he just kept crying. Luka said because he was hungry, he couldn't. He said it was hardly tasty, but they were hungry and ate it. Juro was way past the age of a suckling baby, and he wanted his mother to nurse him. This was difficult for Petra, for she herself was hungry and had no breast milk. Luka said Juro would cry himself to sleep. Cry was torment for Petra. As though the family didn't have enough problems, one day their home caught on fire. Petra had hidden what in our money today would be a couple of dollars. To Petra it was like $100. After the fire was extinguished, she looked for the money she had hidden and found it was gone. She went outdoor weeping loudly, and a neighbor, Janko Drakulic, heard her wails and came to her and said, "Don't cry, your money is in my pocket." At the time, Petra was so upset and heartbroken over the fire that she couldn't contain her stress and lashed out at Janko, who really seemed to be a hero. But Luka said his mother couldn't understand how he found the money, and that brought on some bitterness between the two Drakulic families. Ironically, destiny played a hand in the life of the Drakulic families, as Janko's daughter Stana eventually was to become Luka's second wife. Luka's childhood poverty was far from being better. If anything, it seemed to get sadder. If one went back and seen the land that Svio and Petra owned, it would not seem of much value in terms of dollars. Some of it was a slopey piece of ground that it was enough to sustain, but it was enough to sustain the family as far as growing some vegetables and even growing hay for a cow. It is said that when the Serbs were fighting the Turks, those who were foot soldiers got the worst of offered land for homes, and it was usually the foot soldiers occupied the hillsides, and the horse soldiers got close to the road or highway for their homes. Apparently somewhere in those times there was a foot soldier in the Drakulic past, as the area where Luka and Stana lived was not valuable ground. Petra planned to give the title of her property to her 4 sons. That was always a part of her plans as far as her children were concerned after her husband died. One day, a woman who Luka called Ruda began to visit Petra, and suddenly she took on the role of being a matchmaker. She told Petra she could live a better life if she married a man named Juda Jovic, who was a widower. After much coaxing, Petra told her she would accept Juda's proposal, believing she was going to be better off than she had been living. When word reached her oldest son, Dragic, that she was about to marry the widower, Juda, Dragic was quite shocked and quite furious, Luka said. Dragic came to confront his mother with the news he heard, and he told her she had disappointed him in her decision. Perhaps he was angry, thinking Petra was going to give Juda title to the ground she promised her sons. However, she never reneged on her promise. Due to this, Juda became mean to Petra and to the boys. Dragic's age as well as Juban is somewhat strange to understand. According to Luka, Dragic was on his own working in the cello as a hard hand, and so was Juban. Luka says Dragic was angry over his mother's decision to marry Juda, and his demeanor was rather mature for a boy who Luka told us was born in 1880. If this is correct, then Luka had to be older than age 6 when his mother died. Luka is 2 years older than Juda. Judah, according to Luka, was almost 5 years old and was still suckling his mother's breast. If Judah was born in 1886 and was 5 years old and suckling his mother's breast, then she was yet not married to Juda Jovic. 1886 plus 5 would bring you up to 1891 year. And Luka then in 1891 was 7 years old, and Petra then was still unmarried to Juda. Could it be that Petra married Juda a couple of years later, perhaps when Luka was 8 or even 9? If this was so, then Dragic could have been only 12 years old or 13 at the time. Married life with Juda Jovic was a nightmare for Petra. According to Luka, he was mean as the devil himself. One day when his mother was cooking and making a roux, which Serbians refer to as zafrik, Luka looked at the roux, the zafrik, and it looked distasteful because of the thickness. And Juda happened to be there when Luka said he would never eat that. When the time came to sit down to dinner, Luka went to the table to eat, but Juda came over to him and pulled him by the ear and led him away from the table, telling him, You said this was not good. You were not going to eat it, so you won't." Of course, Luca had forgotten what he said about the Zafrik, but Judah well remembered. It was late at night that his mother came to Luca and told him, "Be quiet and go and eat what she saved for him." Another time, while it was close to dawn, he saw his mother sitting with a comb in her hand, and Judah hovering over her like he was choking her. Petra moaned and cried, saying, "Yoi, yoi," or what is, "Oh, oh." Judah let go of her and said to her, "It will be yoi, yoi one day for you." There was no happiness to be told by Luca where their life in that home was concerned. It was like living in fear always when Judah was in the house. Judah had a daughter. Her name was Maria from his previous marriage. Luca never complained in any way about her, but Luca was ever fearful of his stepfather. One morning, his mother got him breakfast, and she left him out of the door so he could go out and join the other youngsters in the close by. He was playing with some of them and singing when suddenly a boy named Rade Drakulic, whose nickname here in America was Yellow because his complexion always had this yellow look. He came by and said to Luca, "You are singing and your mother is lying dead on a bench at home." Luca got angry at Rade for saying those words and said to him, "My mother left me out this morning and she was okay. Why do you say this?" Rade told him to go see for yourself if I am lying. On those words, Luca started to run as fast as he could to his house. There his mother was indeed lying as Rade said, and his stepfather was giving drinks to the woman who had dressed and laid his mother on the table bench. Luca's heart wanted to burst with sadness. He loved his mother so very much. The next day was the funeral, and he rode with his aunt to the cemetery. As the priest finished the service and they lowered Petra's coffin, Luca leaped forward to jump after his mother. The priest grabbed and caught Luca and hugged him and said to him, "No, no, dear child, you can't do that." As he got into the horse buggy, he told his aunt how he awoke one morning and saw his mother with a comb in her hand, and how Judah came to her, bent over and was choking her, and how Luca heard Petra saying "Yoi, yoi," and Judah releasing her and saying, "It isn't yoi, but it will be." The aunt began to scold Luca for not telling this to someone earlier, because Judah may have murdered Petra, and what could anybody do now to Judah? Luca's younger brother said that their mother, Petra, was probably pregnant, and he may have beat her, as there was blood all over the floor, and she probably bled to death. Luca was very scared of Judah. Judah saw he wasn't going to have rights to Petra's house, so he didn't want Luca around. Luca had a pair of shoes on his feet that Judah may have bought because he told Luca to untie the shoes, opanke, and throw the shoes to him. As Luca was untying the shoe, he never took his eyes off of Judah. One shoe came off and Judah told him to throw it to him and take off the other. He did as he was told to do, and then ran as fast as he could without shoes. Luca ran through the woods until he came upon a stranger and asked which way to the road or highway. The stranger pointed the direction to the road, and Luca again ran until he came to the road. Once on the road, he sought the house of his aunt. Luca never told his children if the aunt was his father's sister or his mother's. Apparently, he didn't stay too long at the house. Perhaps the aunt was able to have him for only a short while, as the years that followed were once again very depressing times for Luca. Juro had a place with an aunt, but Luca never said if the aunt was the same who was at the funeral of his mother or another aunt. These are some of the things that his children wish they had inquired more than they did. It would have been good for Luca's family to have known the name of the aunts, as there may be yet kin living in Yugoslavia. The sons of Petra and Svio were left to themselves. Luca didn't talk much on the life and whereabouts of his three brothers. Perhaps this was because each of them was trying as best they could to earn their daily bread. His stories of life in the old country were mostly about himself, yet there was a strong bond of love amongst the brothers, as each knew the whereabouts of the other. For when Luca immigrated to America, his immediate plan was to bring the other brothers to America too. Luca must have been about 10 years old when he was on his own. What sad stories he told about his life back then. He went about the cellar looking for someone to take him in as a hard hand. He would be in the stable with cows. When the cows would urinate, he would quickly walk to the spot in his bare feet to warm his feet. He had no shoes to put on. Once he was sitting outside of an elderly man's house. The man came out and saw Luca. He asked Luca, "Are you hungry, Luli?" a nickname given to him when he was small. And then he went back inside and come out with a handful of cornmeal mush and gave it to Luca. Luca said that that handful of cornmeal mush was equal to a child eating an ice cream cone. Many times the kindness shown by the man was remembered over and over to his family. Yet what was rather ironic was his story of the village priest coming to his home when his mother was yet a widow to bless their home. Luca said his mother was not at home, and he and his younger brother were alone, waiting and hoping she would soon return with some kind of food for them. When the priest came inside with his aide, tutor, and blessed their home, he looked at his aide and simply said, "See what good children these boys are. They watch their home while their mom is away." Luca said he had a bag of various items that people gave to him, which was traditional when a priest blessed homes. Luca and Juro were hoping he would reach into the bag and give them something to eat, but the priest simply patted their heads and left. Ironically, these stories never weakened Luca's faith in God, and Luca never complained against God for all the poverty he endured. He was a firm believer in orthodoxy to the very end. Probably some of the villagers knew Luca's poverty because one day as Luca was watching a man rubbing his shoes with a piece of bacon and then discarding it, the man said to him, if he gave him a coin equivalent to our penny, would he eat that bacon? Luca laughed as he told his story and said, "I would have eaten that bacon for nothing." Luca was well liked by all, and he was fond of singing. He firmly believed in the words, "He who sings thinks no evil." In Serbian, ko pjeva zlo ne misli. Living amongst the Serbians back then were many Croatian families. Most relationships between Serbs and Croats were not all that bad, but not as congenial as perhaps one would want them to be. But it was because of their religious difference. Yet my father said he was always well received by Croatians. He said he had a very dear Croatian friend whose name was Joso Mlinaric. He worked as a hard hand for 2 years with the Croatians, and he said he liked working with them, especially since they gave you 2 meals